Alright guys, today's video is all about money. Now, it's not always the most exciting topic, but let's be real, it's one of the most important topics. And as always, my goal as a real estate advisor is to ensure my clients have all the information, resources, and tools that they need to make the best decision possible. And that includes making sure we're looking at any sort of hidden costs or just costs that they were not expecting, because that can be equally as unpleasantly surprising. And I always say there's nothing funny about money, and so we're gonna go ahead and dive straight into it. Now, as a realtor that works in a predominantly veteran area, so that means I deal a lot with VA loans, and with that, sometimes there's a misconception on closing costs versus down payment. And so I don't consider it a hidden cost or fee, but it is something sometimes people are not always expecting, and so that's why it's number one here. If you are a veteran, you do not have a down payment, so thank you so much for your service. You don't have a down payment, which does automatically save you thousands of dollars, and that's amazing, but you are still responsible for your closing cost. And I do see that comes up quite often with people not realizing that there is a separation between the two and that buyers are still responsible for it. Now, sometimes depending on the market, if it's a buyer's market, seller's market, or just somewhere in between, a lot of times we can get things negotiated in, but please know it is not automatic, and not all sellers have the equity to do it or just want to do it, because I've run into both. Sometimes sellers just don't want to. They want to make as much as they can and go do whatever they need to do, or they don't have the equity to do it. And I also like to make sure people always kind of keep in mind, this is a small caveat, make sure you just always keep in mind that one day you're going to be on the opposite end of that table receiving an offer, so just be mindful. Now, as an agent, I'm always going to be advocating very well for my clients and showing them the perspective from both sides, seeing, okay, how can we make this work for everyone so we can get to the closing table, because ultimately that is the goal. But I do like to make sure people do realize closing costs are not automatically going to be paid by another party. So knowing your finances is something that we always kind of discuss. Of course, always share it with your lender as well, because they're going to be in that side a lot more than I am. But I just like to make sure people do realize that. So when anticipating closing costs, regardless if it's a new home, old home, it doesn't matter. There are still closing costs. New construction oftentimes have more incentives, but sometimes even then they don't cover it all, or it's a choose this or that or something like that. Now, a lot of times the next question is, okay, but what are closing costs? Because they are quite a few different things. So you'll always see a breakdown, and then when I'm working with my clients, I do have a buyer's guide that I provide them that gives them a lot of examples, so it starts to all fit together as one big puzzle, as okay, now I see where these charges are coming from. But it can include lender fees, title insurance, appraisal fees, escrow fees, a lot of little things that start to add up that, of course, at the bottom do have a price tag on them. And so just keeping in mind, you do have closing costs, even veteran buyers, FHA buyers, and so we always just want to make sure we are factoring that in. Now, by all means, if we can get another party to pay for all of it, or pretty hefty contribution, that's awesome, but just make sure, if not, we do have another way to cover those. Now, I always kind of just give a percentage wise, especially now because everything has gone up a little bit more. So a lot of places property taxes have increased, homeowners insurance has increased. So previously, we used to advise, somewhere between 2 to 4% of the purchase price of the home. Now I really just stick to 3 to 4% of purchase price of the home. I'd rather shoot a little high and, we have some cushion versus shooting low and maybe, you weren't fully prepared for all that. Now, this is my advice. By all means, always talk to your lender, because they're gonna give their professional advice as a lender, as a mortgage professional. But I do like to have these conversations with clients, because a lot of times it's one of the first questions that pop up anyway, and so we just go ahead and have that discussion.
Hey, if you're thinking of relocating to the Fort Cavazos area, I have just the thing for you. My team and I have actually taken the time to create the ultimate relocation guide, which is meant to save you hours of research. And I have it linked right down below. The best part is there's no obligation to this, and it's going to come with everything from the top employers to the best schools and a boatload of other information. Everything that you need to make the best decision. Again, no obligation. So make sure you click the link below. It also will be pinned, and I hope that it helps.
And make sure you guys comment down below if you have questions, if you experienced something, or if you are ready to start your search. And then, of course, we can connect and get that process started, because I do have a very in-depth buyer's guide that I like to provide and go over it. And so it does cover multiple different things just to keep in mind and lays out the process as best as I can. But number 2 is home inspections. Now, sometimes people don't always anticipate on getting a home inspection, but I always encourage you to do it because you're purchasing a home, which means it's going to be one of the largest investments that you're going to make in a good while. And so you want to make sure you're covering yourself from any sort of future things. Now, their homes, anything can happen, but at least you know where you're walking in day one or what you're walking into. And a lot of times we're able to get some things negotiated, or if something big does happen, we have the opportunity to get you out of that contract safely before it even gets too far. Now, in our area, one of the biggest things we look at are roofs and foundations, but that's a whole different thing. But just knowing that you're going to budget and have some funds set aside for the home inspection. If you are a veteran, you also may need a WDI, which is a wood strike insect inspection. If it's an older home, it could cost a little bit more. So just kind of making sure that we have those funds set aside. So again, there's limited surprises and everything runs very smoothly because you already know what to anticipate at your next step. Now, one of the things that people don't always think about are surveys. A lot of times sellers already have their survey, maybe from their previous one, or they're going to cover it. But if not, that is another closing cost expense, and surveys can get very expensive. And one thing to keep in mind too, some survey companies have a copyright to where you may not be able to utilize an old survey, and so one party is going to have to pay for that. Now, surveys can range depending on the company and how the property and all those sort of things, so but that can be an expensive piece of paper. It will likely exceed the cost of your home inspection, depending on it, but it can, between $500 and $700. There's a, pretty good rate or difference there, but it is always an expense to keep in mind because, of course, if you're looking to purchase, you've got this expense here, this expense there, this expense there, and it can start to add up if you're not well equipped and prepared for it. So keeping in mind about closing costs, surveys, home inspections, also taxes, especially being here in Texas. Taxes a lot of times can catch people by surprise a little bit. Now, typically that's going to be covered in your closing costs, but that it could be a reason why it jumps up sometimes when people are not always calculating everything, or they're like, oh, I got this and that. You also have to consider property taxes. Now, when in the year you close on a property, could be good for the seller, could be good for the buyer, and depending on how much is collected. But it is something to always keep in mind. Certain areas, as we know, have higher property taxes than other areas, and so that could be something that you keep in mind too in your home search. Maybe you get a nicer home in a slightly lower priced area as far as their property taxes. So there's always some give and take on there, and there's all different ways to look at home search, but knowing that property taxes are going to be in there is something that you definitely want to know. Now, of course, like I said, I'm in a predominantly veteran area. If you are 100% disabled veteran, then you do not have to pay property taxes on your main home. Now, I like to reiterate that sometimes people want to have it on a second home or something like that. Unfortunately, that is not the case. It is only going to be applicable to your homestead.
All right, now for the question of the day. What is the first thing you look for in a new city? Is it a coffee shop or your favorite store? I really want to know, so make sure you comment down below, or better yet, shoot me a text, email, or even give me a call. All my information is going to pop up here on the screen. So again, what is the first thing you look for in a new city?
And my next thing just to be mindful of as far as expenses that people don't always expect is homeowners insurance. Now, a lot of times when you're connected to your lender, they will give you just a rough quote, but it's always good to just remember that until you actually talk to a insurance broker or an agent, then they'll actually be able to provide you with more accurate estimates as far as your homeowner's insurance. And depending on the area, if there's been any natural disasters, the age of the home, there's several different factors that could help the price of it, or it could unfortunately make it increase a little bit. We've seen a lot more natural disasters across the nation, and so there is a direct reflection of these expenses in home insurance policies. So just something to be mindful of that as well. Now, this next expense I know is some people's just thorn in the side, but HOAs. They are out here. They're becoming a lot more popular, even in our area. Now, I will say the good thing is we only have a few that are more expensive. A lot of them are just to help with maintenance and drainage in communities, but however, it is still an additional expense. And when you are looking to place an offer on a home, there will be additional documentation to see if you would like to help contribute towards the transition, or because of course, if it's a new homeowner, they have to get a certificate and there could be fees associated with it. And so if you would like to contribute to that, if so, that is something else that will add to your closing costs at the end, and just something to be mindful of when you are living in that community. you have to pay HOA, and sometimes it's separate, so it's just something that you need to keep on your radar. Whether you do it online or however that community is set up, it's still an extra payment, and you don't want to get behind on those because you can get in trouble. Even if it's a small amount, they will add up.
Hey guys, as much as I love making these videos, there's one thing that I absolutely love more, and that's helping families from all over the US make the move here to the Fort Cavazos and surrounding area. I've helped countless families move here, so whether you're coming out next week, next month, or even next year, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My contact information is going to be right here down below in case you missed the pop-up screen, and I look forward to helping you and your family move to our beautiful area.
And so it's just something to always just keep in mind down the line. If you're cool with them, a lot of people are, and a lot of people are not. 50 one way, 50 the other way. I'm neutral on them. I think they can help to hold property value, and then at the same time, depending if they're very overbearing, they can hinder your creativity if you want to do something on the exterior home a lot of times, because they may have some restrictions on that piece. So keeping in mind, if you're looking at purchasing a home in a HOA, there are always some additional costs with it. Even if they're small, it's still something that you need to just discuss and keep in mind. Now, my last one is going to be utilities. And drop a comment if you have seen your utility bill go up, because your girl has. But it's definitely something just to keep in mind, because a lot of times people want the biggest home possible, but also know the biggest home possible is going to also have an increased utility expense, whether it be water, electricity, gas, all of the above. The more square footage that you need to heat and cool, the higher that is going to be. The bigger yard, especially if you want to keep it pretty and green, the more water that it will consume. Whatever utilities that you need, the bigger the home, the more it's going to cost. Now, sometimes, we catch homes with solar panels, or people decide to invest in solar panels. That's a whole different topic. But just in general, one is setting up those utilities, especially if you're a first-time home buyer, and maybe you have not had to set them all up because you've been living in places that have covered some of the utilities. Sometimes you have to put down deposits for those, and just now knowing, okay, now I have a larger space, that means my utilities are going to go up. So budgeting for all these things ahead of time, the best of your abilities. You never truly know until you're going through that process, but having the information and resources ahead of time can help tremendously. Even asking myself, asking the lender certain questions, I'm always up to share what I can to help that transition be smoother for you. And even when it's utilities, especially if it's a certain type, whether it's gas or solar, those are some of the things that I usually ask for. I'll even request, hey, can the seller share us, what their typical utility bill looks like, so the buyer then can anticipate, okay, I know I need to budget a little bit differently, or maybe it's better than they anticipate. So whichever the case may be, knowing some of these hidden costs can now be brought to the light, so you can be well equipped and prepared to make good decisions. So make sure you ask some questions down below, share some comments. I definitely wanted to hear some feedback on this video, and what other costs have you come across, or what questions do you have, or did I hope to bring anything or highlight any sort of aspect of the purchasing process to you, so now you feel more informed. And I will see you guys on my next video.